Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 24 ranked wide receivers for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be mainly focusing in on wide receivers 13 through 24, as I already did a video last week focusing in on wide receivers 1 through 12. So if you want an in-depth look into those wide receivers, please make sure that you check out that video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the top 12 wide receivers, but not as in-depth as I did inside of that video today. We're mainly focusing in, like I said, onto wide receivers 13 through 24. But before we get into this breakdown of the wide receiver position, I would like to ask, if you are new to my YouTube channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, you end up having a great time, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out this content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure to hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to let you guys know that my rankings are available for free on awesemo.com. Link down below in the description and in the pinned comment. I also write articles every single day about fantasy football, so please make sure that you check them out. Link in the description as well as in the pinned comment. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So right now, at the top three at the wide receiver position, basically everyone has Devonze Adams, Stefan Diggs, and Tyreke Hill in some type of an order. If you want to argue about the fact that Tyreke Hill is better than Devonze Adams for fantasy this season, in reality, there really is no argument. They are all so close that I would be fine having really any of them ranked inside of my top three. For me, I have Devonze Adams ranked as my #1 wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. I just believe there is so much safety with Aaron Rodgers being his quarterback, and the fact that he targets Devonze Adams so often when driving up and down the field, as well as in the red zone. So I really believe in Devonze Adams this season yet again, and will happily take him as the #1 wide receiver off of the board. At number 2, we have Stefan Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, one of the best offenses in the NFL. Stefan Diggs was obviously a key piece in unlocking Josh Allen's potential. We saw him last year take a huge leap compared to his last couple of seasons in the NFL, and I think Stefan Diggs is going to have a great year yet again in 2021. At number 3, we have Tyreke Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the only wide receivers in fantasy football who in any given game could get 150 yards, 200 plus yards, and 3 total touchdowns in a game. Tyreke Hill is basically a game-breaking wide receiver because of how strong this offense is, how strong of a quarterback that Patrick Mahomes is, as well as the fact that Tyreke Hill is so fucking fast that he's always open. So I like Tyreke Hill as my wide receiver number 3. At number 4, we have Calvin Ridley, who would be my favorite wide receiver that's not being drafted inside of the top 3 to potentially finish as the wide receiver number 1 in fantasy football in Atlanta. With Julio Jones gone, there's just going to be so many targets going Calvin Ridley's way. Even when Julio Jones was healthy, Calvin Ridley was still getting fed all the time in the game. So I think Calvin Ridley has a very good chance this year to finish as the wide receiver number 1. At number 5, we have DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals. It seems like this guy has been a staple inside of top 5 wide receiver rankings for what feels like forever. Whether it was in Houston or in Arizona, this guy's going to be putting up big numbers year in and year out. I really like DeAndre Hopkins as my wide receiver number 5. Outside of the top 5, coming in at number 6, we have sophomore wide receiver Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, Justin Jefferson laid the smack down on his expectations as he finished very highly last season at the wide receiver position, being very reliable basically after week 3 and on. His first 2 games of his career were not the greatest, but after that big week 3 performance, he basically never looked back and put up big numbers basically week in and week out, and I believe he could do something very similar in 2021. While most people don't like Kirk Cousins, they don't love the Minnesota Vikings offense, Justin Jefferson should still be considered as a top 6 wide receiver. Coming in at wide receivers 7 through 12, again, the in-depth breakdown comes with wide receivers 13 through 24. Here, we're just kind of giving you guys a little bit of a summation of these wide receivers. At number 7, we have A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. Now, obviously, Julio Jones going to the Tennessee Titans, somewhat in a way, a lot of people like to spin this into it dampens A.J. Brown's potential. Now, obviously, that is kind of true, but in another way, it is also false, because now you can't triple cover A.J. Brown, because A.J. Brown was really the only wide receiver there after Corey Davis left in the offseason to go to the New York Football Jets. So now Julio Jones is there to draw coverage away. I think A.J. Brown round, definitely has a shot to finish as a top 5 wide receiver, coming in as my wide receiver number 7. At number 8, we have Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers. Just like with Justin Jefferson, Justin Herbert, the pervert quarterback of the LA Chargers, really stomped on those expectations and played amazing. Many were quick to call Justin Herbert a bust before he even stepped foot on the gridiron at the NFL level. And if I'm being honest with you, I was not necessarily someone who thought he was a bust instantly, but I was like, man, this is going to kind of suck. Tyrod Taylor didn't look the best, but obviously losing your starting quarterback is definitely going to put a dampen on Keenan Allen's potential, but it was exactly the opposite of that, because after Tyrod Taylor got stabbed by his doctor, sadly, Keenan Allen was balling out with Justin Herbert. If Justin Herbert continues to get better in 2021, Keenan Allen really does have the upside of a top 5 wide receiver. He's going to be heavily peppered with targets in this offense. At number 9, we have Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. Now, Allen Robinson has been one of the more consistent wide receivers in fantasy football throughout his career, from Jacksonville all the way to Chicago. He has done this all with basically garbage-ass quarterbacks. He's had Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky, and Blake Bortles as his quarterbacks. Now, he gets Andy Dalton. Not too much of a step up there, but eventually I believe Justin Fields will become the guy in Chicago this season, and Allen Robinson's upside definitely gets a lot higher. At number 10, we have Terry McLaurin, wide receiver of the Washington football team. Now, last year, I had very high expectations of Terry McLaurin, and he obviously didn't really live up to those. Now, he wasn't a complete and utter bust in fantasy football. He wasn't shit, but he wasn't the greatest like I expected him to potentially be. But you can attribute that mostly to the quarterback carousel that was happening in Washington. Now, Ryan Fitzmagic is the guy with Fitzpatrick there. I believe he is going to lock into Terry McLaurin a similar way to, for the Dolphins, he locked into Devontae Parker in 2019, and we can see an excellent year out of Terry McLaurin. And McLaurin, in my opinion, as a Dolphins fan, is 90 times better than Devontae Parker. At number 11, we have DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, I definitely have Metcalf ranked much lower than the consensus, mainly because I believe the Seattle Seahawks are going to be a much more run-heavy team in 2021. I also believe that, say they are a little bit more pass-heavy, then I believe that when Locket was going absolutely apeshit in these games, going ham, DK Metcalf did nothing. When Metcalf was going ham, Locket was doing nothing. So I really think this is still going to be a very inconsistent season out of DK Metcalf if they pass the ball. Now, I could be wrong. DK Metcalf is basically built like a Greek god, etched out of stone. He is like basically, if you were to go into a lab and try to clone the perfect wide receiver, DK Metcalf would be one of those players that you would clone. He is so good, but the situation there in Seattle, to me, isn't the best, with the fact that I believe they're going to be much more run heavy in 2021, especially if the defense gets better. At number 12, we have CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb was a rookie last season, obviously didn't play amazing, but did look pretty solid. Would have looked a lot better if Dak Prescott was able to stay healthy. I believe in 2021, if Dak Prescott is healthy going into the season and he's able to stay healthy for the whole 2021 fantasy football season, then CeeDee Lamb can really be a top 5 wide receiver. This team's defense is so bad that they're going to have to be throwing the ball all game long, and that is really going to help out CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, into the in-depth part in the video where we go in-depth on wide receivers 13 through 24. If you guys have ended up enjoying thus far, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Coming in at number 13, we have Robert Woods of the LA Rams. Now, going into the offseason, I was very high on Robert Woods, having him ranked inside my top 12. Now, I did move him down to 13, but if I'm being honest with you, that's not much of a demotion. It's just more the fact that I think CeeDee Lamb might have more upside due to how pass heavy this team could be if the defense continues to be terrible. Robert Woods for the LA Rams right now, coming off the board as wide receiver number 14 overall pick, 32.90, so he sits pretty at the end of the 3rd round. I believe with the addition of Matthew Stafford, it just ups the potential that Robert Woods could have. Robert Woods has been relatively consistent throughout his career. Obviously, with Jared Goff last season, Robert Woods was still able to perform, but imagine how much better it could look with a quarterback that, honestly, in my opinion, could be a top 5 quarterback pound for pound in the NFL in Matthew Stafford. Last year in 16 games, Robert Woods finished as the wide receiver 12 in PPR, 13.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 3 in standard, averaging 15.3 PPR points per game, 12.5 half PPR points per game, and 9.7 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 19 in PPR, 19.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 19 in standard, having 130 targets on the season, 8.1 per game, ranking 12th at wide receiver, 90 receptions, 11th at the wide receiver position, 5.6 per game, for 935 receiving yards, 58.4 per game, ranking 22nd at wide receiver, and 8 total touchdowns on the season, ranking 14th at the wide receiver position. Guess what? Last year, Robert Woods was targeted heavily, but his target quality rating was 4.59. 4.59 out of 10, 98th at wide receiver. His catchable target rate, 74.6%. 97 targets were catchable, ranking 69th at wide receiver. Very nice. I like if I'm Borat, but in reality, 69th. That fucking sucks for Robert Woods. This season, I expect that number to go up a ton. I think Robert Woods is a very solid wide receiver, and to me, is the number 1 target in this offense for the LA Rams. I like to compare this situation to the Detroit Lions in 2019. Kenny Gallaudet and Marvin Jones. We got Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. To me, Robert Woods is more of the Kenny Gallaudet type, the alpha wide receiver, but that doesn't mean that Cooper Kupp can't be really fucking good too, because that season, Marvin Jones was really good as well, and I think this offense is going to be very, very dangerous in 2021. They are one of the teams that I believe could really win the Super Bowl this season, and I think if Robert Woods is on this team, he's able to stay healthy, then he could really finish inside of the top 12. He had a 23% target share in the LA Rams offense last season, ranking 26th at the wide receiver position with a 20% target share inside the red zone. I expect Robert Woods to be very heavily involved in the LA Rams offense, and I really do believe that Matthew Stafford is going to take this team to the next level. At number 14, we have underdog ADP wide receiver number 19, Julio Jones of the Tennessee Titans. Overall ADP 41.10. This man is going in the 4th round. Sometimes I see this guy go in the 5th round, and I do not get it at all. I've talked about this so often on my channel. Julio Jones is one of my must-draft wide receivers. He is a league-winning wide receiver where he's going right now, because there is not a single doubt in my mind that Julio Jones couldn't easily be a top 12 wide receiver or even be a top 5 wide receiver like he was in the past. Now, I understand that going from the ultra pass-heavy, obviously Atlanta Falcons, who throw the ball so much every single game, to the Tennessee Titans, who like to run the ball, definitely does dampen his potential somewhat. But you also don't trade for Julio Jones if you don't expect to be using this guy a whole lot in your offense. Him and A.J. Brown are an unstoppable duo, and I think it's going to be impossible. You can't double cover A.J. Brown because then Julio's open. You can't double cover Julio because then A.J. Brown is open, and you can't stack the box because then Julio and A.J. Brown are going to be open, and if you don't stack the box, then guess what's going to happen? Derrick Henry is going to pound your defense into submission. Julio Jones and this Tennessee Titans team is going to be very, very solid in 2021, and I expect Julio Jones to be peppered with targets in this offense. Last season, sure, he ended up getting hurt. He only played in 9 total games on the season, finishing as wide receiver 52 in PPR, 53.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 52 in standard, averaging 16.2 PPR points per game, 13.4 half PPR points per game, and 10.6 standard points per game, meaning on a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 14 in PPR, 13.5 PPR, the wide receiver 12 in standard. So if you're looking at it from a points per game basis, Julio Jones, even in his quote-unquote old age, hasn't lost a single step. He's still an elite wide receiver in the NFL. I understand the targets may go down, but the targets are going to be in much better scenarios. Now, Julio Jones is one of those wide receivers that I can basically go out there and scream from the mountaintops that this motherfucker is probably only going to score like 3 to 6 touchdowns on the season. Trying to project touchdowns at any position is very, very hard, but with Julio Jones, it's easy because this guy never scores a lot of touchdowns. It's like he's allergic to scoring touchdowns. I swear, he'll be wide open in the end zone and he just drops the ball or something. It doesn't make any sense. But even despite the amount of touchdowns, the lack of touchdowns, therefore, with Julio Jones. It doesn't matter because he could still easily finish as a top 12 wide receiver. He had 68 targets last year, 7.6 per game, ranking 65th at wide receiver in just those 9 games, having 51 receptions, 5.7 per game, ranking 54th at wide receiver, 771 receiving yards, 85.7 per game, ranking 39th at wide receiver for 3 total touchdowns, 66 at wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if this man played in 16 games last season and he still had 3 touchdowns. I feel like he almost got lucky scoring 3 touchdowns in the first 9 games of the season. But again, it's more of a joke on the touchdowns, but it's also kind of serious because he never really does score any touchdowns. I believe very heavily in Julio this season. I don't know why he's getting drafted so far back in drafts. He's still Julio Jones. Sure, he's on a less pass-heavy team, but I believe the circumstance of the targets are going to be a lot better. He's going to be getting the targets in better situations. I also believe that he may still get as many targets as he got in Atlanta. At number 15, we have Amari Cooper, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. Underdog ADP, wide receiver number 13 off of the board. So I'm definitely a little bit lower on Amari Cooper than consensus. Overall pick 31.70, sitting at the back of the 3rd round. Now, when it comes to Amari Cooper, the upside here is immense. It's the same upside I talked about with CeeDee Lamb, but I honestly think there's a pretty solid chance that Amari Cooper gets alphaed by CeeDee Lamb, meaning that CeeDee Lamb becomes the true alpha number 1 target on this team, and Amari Cooper gets pushed back to number 2. Now, even if that happens, which is a scenario I could see happening, it would be hard, very hard, for Amari Cooper to not finish as a top 24 wide receiver, a top 16 wide receiver, because even without Dak Prescott last year, Amari Cooper finished exactly as that, a top 20 wide receiver in all formats. In 15 games, finishing as wide receiver 15 in PPR, 16 half PPR, and the wide receiver number 19 in standard. The season looked so good, right? Dak Prescott is having to sling the rock so often in these games because, like I said earlier with CeeDee Lamb, the defense there is fucking terrible. And sure, in the offseason, during the draft, they drafted more defensive players. The odds that all of those guys are going to magically become Hall of Famers in this defense to be instantly good year 1 is so low. There's going to be a defense that is going to struggle and an offense that is going to have to be throwing the ball at an extremely high rate. And I believe that Amari Cooper is going to be a big benefactor of that and may even be the biggest benefactor over CeeDee Lamb. If I'm being honest with you, Amari Cooper last year was averaging 14.8 PPR points per game, 11.9 half PPR points per game, and 9 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 21 in PPR, 21 and half PPR, tied with DJ Moore and Marvin Jones, as well as Deontay Johnson and Jamison Crowder, and the wide receiver number 27 in standard, tied with Curtis Samuel, Corey Davis, and Antonio Brown. Last year, he had 130 targets, 8.1 per game, ranking 12th at the wide receiver position. 92 receptions, 5.8 per game, ranking 9th at wide receiver for 1,114 receiving yards. 69.6 per game, very nice for Amari Cooper. Number 12 at wide receiver for 5 total tugs on the season. 21.1% target share in the offense, ranking 32nd at the wide receiver position. He still had a lot of production, even with just about a 21% target share in the offense. I believe that even if CeeDee Lamb completely alphas out Amari Cooper, he's still going to be around that 20% mark, so it'd be very hard for him to fall outside of the top 24 at the wide receiver position. I believe he is in for a huge year, but both of these guys are heavily dependent on Dak Prescott. If Dak Prescott is healthy, good to go week 1, maybe not 100%, but he's like 95%, then Amari Cooper could be a top 12 wide receiver. If he comes in, he's banged up, he's like 60%, then I'm going to very much worry about Cooper as well as Lamb early on in the season. But obviously, he will continue to get more healthy and get better as the season goes along, so I'm pretty confident in Amari Cooper this season. At number 16, we have a wide receiver that I have way ahead of consensus. ADP right now, wide receiver number 23 for Deontay Johnson, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Overall ADP, 47.80. Last pick inside of the 4th round in a 12-team league. Most of the time, I see him going inside of the 5th round. Now, Deontay Johnson is one of those players that is completely polarizing. Either you're with me, you love Deontay Johnson, you see the upside there in Pittsburgh. You saw Big Ben play in that preseason game yesterday or the day before. I don't remember when they played. I think it was the day before that. And he actually looked really, really good. But you see this, and you're like, man, this is an offense that is scary. The offensive line sucks. Deontay Johnson has the dropitis. He drops the ball left and right every single game. He's not going to fix that. He's going to suck. Or you're with me thinking that, hey, Big Ben looked really good in that preseason game. Deontay Johnson is his clear favorite wide receiver. Deontay Johnson hasn't dropped a pass, I believe, in preseason thus far, and that you believe that Deontay Johnson is going to continue to build on the success he put up last year and not drop the football, so he won't be getting pulled from these games, and he's going to have much more opportunity to score points, which is exactly the mindset that I'm in. Last year in 15 games, getting drafted way outside of the top 25, he was a sleeper wide receiver that I was heavily advocating for last year, and he definitely paid off. In 15 games, finishing as the wide receiver 21 in PPR, 22.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 26 in standard, averaging 14.8 PPR points per game, 11.9 half PPR points per game, and 8.9 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 21 in PPR, 22.5 PPR, tied with like 70 other wide receivers, and the wide receiver number 31 in standard, having 144 targets. 9.6 per game, 6th at wide receiver. He turned the 6th most targets into the 13th most receptions with 88, 5.9 per game. And he turned the 6th most targets into the 25th most receiving yards, 924 receiving yards, 61.6 per game. He also had 7 total touchdowns, 20th at wide receiver. So now imagine he gets 144 targets, and this motherfucker isn't dropping the ball left and right. And the target quality rating goes up because, to me, Big Ben looked a lot better in preseason. He's a lot more slim. He's not, let's be honest with you, Big Ben was pretty fucking out of shape last season, at least in my opinion, and that's how he's been his whole career. But now he's Slim Ben. He's looking a little bit slimmer. He had a 4.88 target quality rating last season. That's not very good. That was 88th at wide receiver. But obviously, he was dropping the ball. 11 drops on the season, 0.73 per game, ranking number 1 at wide receiver, 7.6% drop rate, 16th at wide receiver. So if the quarterback play gets better from Big Ben, which I believe it will, if the, catching from Deontay Johnson, like he actually grabs the football and doesn't drop it, if the drops go down, then Deontay Johnson should easily be in the argument of potentially being a top 12 wide receiver on an offense that pushes the pedal to the fucking metal in the pass catching game. Sure, Najee Harris is going to be used, but a lot of his value is going to come from the nice dump offs from Big Ben. The offensive line isn't good. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot in these games, and Deontay Johnson is going to be a huge benefactor of that. So I believe that Deontay Johnson is going to be great in 2021. I know a lot of people are going to be against me, but it seems like a lot of people on my channel have heard me spiel enough about Deontay Johnson that they really like him as well. Next up, we have 2 wide receivers on the exact same team, wide receivers 17 and 18, Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Mike Evans. First up, we're going to be talking about Chris Godwin, underdog ADP wide receiver number 17 off of the board, pick number 40.00, so he's going in the middle of the 4th round right now, too early on in the 4th round. Now, the reason why I'm not ultra high on Chris Godwin, the reason why I'm not ultra high on Mike Evans, despite them having one of the better quarterbacks in the league, despite the fact the guy's 7,000 years old in Tom Brady, is that Tom Brady isn't the kind of a guy, and I've explained this a lot, that just locks into one wide receiver, right? He doesn't see Mike Evans, who one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and just feeds him the ball. He doesn't do that. Chris Godwin, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, doesn't just feed him. Antonio Brown, he's there as well. Doesn't just feed Antonio Brown. He throws the ball all over the place. They have so many weapons here, and this is a team with a very strong defense, so maybe they don't have to throw as much. Maybe they run the ball a little bit more later on in the game than they did last season, and we see Godwin and Evans struggle. Now again, am I fine drafting Chris Godwin and Mike Evans? 100%. I have them ranked inside of my top 18 wide receivers, but the thing is that I just don't really feel any way towards either of these players. I'm fine drafting them, but it doesn't make me want to, looking at their stats, looking at the team, doesn't make me want to just fucking smash the button and draft Chris Godwin. Same thing goes with Mike Evans. I'm fine drafting them. They just don't really excite me. In 12 games last year, Chris Godwin finished as the wide receiver 31 in PPR, 32.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 30 in standard, averaging 15.9 PPR points per game, 13.2 half PPR points per game, and 10.5 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game basis, he was the wide receiver 15 in PPR, as well as in half PPR, tied with Allen Robinson, and the wide receiver number 13 in standard. So he had a great season last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if both of these guys are top 18 wide receivers again, but what I'm saying is that I just don't feel super positive about either of these guys finishing inside the top 12. If Antonio Brown's usage is similar, then maybe they could. But if it is more of an uptick like I believe it could be, then I think Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are kind of shit out of luck in finishing as a top 12 wide receiver. Last year, Chris Godwin had 84 total targets on the season, 7 per game, ranking 48th at wide receiver. You shouldn't expect like 150 targets out of a guy who played in just 12 games. He had 65 receptions, 5.4 per game, ranking 33rd at wide receiver, 840 receiving yards, 34th at wide receiver, 70 per game, and 7 total touchdowns on the season with an 18.9% target share in the offense, 13.2% in the red zone, 47th at wide receiver. In the red zone, I'm going to tell you right now, Chris Godwin barely gets looked at. He's either going to throw, Tom Brady typically throws the ball to either one of the tight ends. It's not always Gronk, maybe O.J. Howard or something. Gronk, O.J. Howard, or maybe the ball is going to go to Mike Evans, who typically scores 10-plus touchdowns every single year. So Chris Godwin might not be scoring a zillion touchdowns in 2021 from in the red zone. He obviously is one of those guys that can catch a deep ball and take it to the house from Tom Brady. But again, just not super excited about Godwin and Evans. Let me know what you guys think about Chris Godwin's and Evans in the comments, because I think a lot of people are much higher than Chris Godwin and Mike Evans than myself. Next up, we have Mike Evans, wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, underdog ADP, wide receiver number 16 off of the board right now, overall pick 35.20. So basically the last pick inside of the third round or an early fourth round pick. Mike Evans last year in 16 games was the wide receiver 11 in PPR, 10.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 8 in standard. From a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver number 16 in PPR, tied with Brandon Cooks, 13 in half PPR, tied with Julio Jones, and wide receiver number 10 in standard, averaging 15.5 PPR points per game, 13.4 half PPR points per game, and 11.2 standard points per game. So Mike Evans had a great season, but I still believe with Antonio Brown there, if he gets a little bit more usage, then man, oh man, I think Mike Evans and Chris Godwin may struggle to finish inside of the top 12, which is why I have them ranked at 17 and 18. Last year, Mike Evans had an 18% target share in the offense, 21.8% in the red zone, 52nd highest at the wide receiver position, 109 targets, 6.8 per game, 0.1 off of being very nice, number 25 at wide receiver, 70 receptions, 4.4 per game, ranking 28th at wide receiver, 989 receiving yards, 61.8 per game, ranking 17th at wide receiver for 13 total touchdowns on the season, ranking 4th at wide receiver. Mike Evans is very consistent year in and year out, but again, my worry is with Antonio Brown there, with him potentially getting more usage, will they both be able to, Godwin, Evans, stay consistent? I like drafting Antonio Brown later on in the draft. I think he's a very good steal, but right now, where they're going, I'm still fine taking him because, again, I have Godwin ranked as wide receiver 17. He's coming off the board at wide receiver 17. I have Evans ranked at wide receiver 18. He's coming off the board at wide receiver 16. So I'm basically fine taking him at their ADP. I'm just a little bit worried about the upside there with Antonio Brown. Next up at wide receiver 19, to pull up wide receivers 19 through 24. Again, if you guys have ended up enjoying thus far, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. It's free, putting out this content every single day. This is the second video of today. Make sure you hit that like button as well. And follow me on Twitter at NotoriousFNT. SY. Also linked down below in the description. So Cooper Kupp, wide receiver of the LA Rams, underdog ADP, wide receiver 16 off the board. First overall pick inside of the fourth round right now in a 12-team league. Overall pick 36.90. So with Cooper Kupp, the feelings are similar to with Robert Woods. I believe this offense is going to be pounding defenses out with Matthew Stafford under center. I am a huge Matthew Stafford guy. Matthew Stafford truther. I've been beating the drum for Matthew Stafford for years. In Detroit, this guy takes these shitty teams and still throws for 7 zillion yards. He was on pace to throw 5,000 yards in 2019 before he got hurt, basically. He was on pace to throw near 50 touchdowns, if my memory seems to not fail me. Which it doesn't, because he had 2,499 passing yards in 2019 in 8 games, and he had 19 total touchdowns. So it wouldn't have been 50 touchdowns, but it would have been close to 40 touchdowns, and he only had 5 INTs. Matthew Stafford is legitimately really good, and a lot of people don't give him the credit for it. Now, again, I feel like Robert Woods is the Kenny Gallaudet, Cooper Kupp is the Marvin Jones, but people forget that while Marvin Jones gets drafted at like pick 40 at the wide receiver position every single fucking year, this guy always finishes basically, when he's healthy, inside of the top 24, and I believe Cooper Kupp will be similar in 2021. My wide receiver number 19. In 15 games, finished as wide receiver 26 in PPR, 27.5 PPR, and 34 in standard with bad, not really bad quarterback play, but not the best quarterback play by Jared Goff from a points per game perspective. Kupp was the wide receiver 30 in PPR, 35.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 39 in standard, averaging 13.9 PPR points per game, 10.8 half PPR points per game, and 7.8 standard points per game, tied with Hollywood Brown. So Cooper Kupp had an all-right season. The reason why his season was honestly kind of bad was because of the fact that this guy just didn't score any touchdowns last season. He had 125 targets, 8.3 per game, ranking 16th at wide receiver. He had 92 receptions, 6.1 per game, ranking 9th at wide receiver, 969 receiving yards, 64.6 per game, ranking 20th at wide receiver. But he only had 3 touchdowns with a 23.7% target share in the offense, ranking 21st at wide receiver, and a 26% red zone target share. Now again, like I said with Julio Jones, it's easy, or not easy, to predict touchdowns. It's pretty difficult, but when you see a guy only score 3 touchdowns, getting that much usage in the red zone, getting that much usage as a whole on the field, with better quarterback play, you would expect Cooper Kupp's touchdown numbers to drastically, at least in my opinion, increase. He's a guy who in 2019 scored 10 total touchdowns, second highest at the wide receiver position. So it is entirely possible that Cooper Kupp has a big resurgence in 2021. At number 20, we have my boy, Wiki, DJ Moore, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, underdog ADP wide receiver number 20, my wide receiver number 20, overall pick 41.80 off the board right now in the middle of the 4th round. With DJ Moore, we have seen this guy be touted as a potential top 12 options for multiple years in a row at the wide receiver position, and I was a huge fan of him going into last year. But the thing with DJ Moore is that he, just like Julio Jones, basically gets the sniffles in the end zone or something. He is allergic to scoring touchdowns. In 15 games, DJ Moore finished as the wide receiver 25 in PPR, 21.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 17 in standard, averaging 14.1 PPR points per game, 11.9 half PPR points per game, and 9.7 standard points per game, meaning on a points per game basis, he was the wide receiver 27 in PPR, tied with his teammate Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 21.5 PPR, tied with Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Marvin Jones, and Jamison Crowder, and the wide receiver number 19 in standard. So again, he has this big year, puts up these big numbers. I'm going to read off to you right now, but he just cannot simply score a fucking touchdown to save the guy's life. 118 targets, 7.9 per game, ranking 19th at wide receiver. 66 receptions, 31st at wide receiver, 4.4 per game. 1,193 receiving yards, 9th at wide receiver. 66 receptions, 1,193 receiving yards, almost 1,200 receiving yards, and just 4 total touchdowns, 49th at wide receiver. Now, I don't expect Sam Darnold to just completely change this team, right? Especially in year 1. I don't expect that to happen. But I think that there's a pretty good chance that Sam Darnold is either exactly the same as Teddy Bridgewater. I'm not a huge Teddy Bridgewater guy. I think he's not a quarterback that wins you games. He's just a quarterback that basically you throw him out there and he's not going to make any stupid mistakes to lose you the game, but he's never really going to go out there and sling the rock 6,000 yards down the field to have a guy like DJ Moore really ball out. But my thought process on that is kind of wrong, if I'm being honest with you, because the air yards last year, he had 1,575 air yards last season, ranking 5th at the wide receiver position. So he was getting the deep ball thrown to him. Maybe it's just the fact that Teddy Bridgewater isn't the greatest at throwing the deep ball, if I'm being honest with you. But like I said, I don't think Sam Darnold, Mono Man Sam, is necessarily leaps and bounds ahead of Teddy Bridgewater, but if he's just slightly better, then DJ Moore should get that increase. And the reason why he's sitting here at 20 and I can't rank him higher is because of the touchdowns. If he somehow is able to figure out how to score like 8 touchdowns, then he's probably a top 12 wide receiver. But with what we've seen in his career path, it's pretty hard for me to rank him anywhere ahead of wide receiver number 20. At number 21, we have Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings, underdog ADP wide receiver number 25 off of the board. Overall pick 5.01, so 5th round, pick 1, pick 48.80. Adam Thielen, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings last year, absolutely made a killing. He was digging graves by the fact that this guy, unlike DJ Moore, is just scoring a shit ton of touchdowns. He scored 14 total touchdowns on the season, ranking 3rd at wide receiver, making him finish as the wide receiver number 10 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 7 in standard, playing in 15 games, averaging 16.9 PPR points per game, 14.5 half PPR points per game, and 12 standard points per game, meaning on a points per game basis, he was the wide receiver 11 in PPR, 7.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 7 in standard, having 108 targets on the season, 7.2 per game, ranking 28th at the wide receiver position. 74 receptions, 24th at wide receiver. 925 receiving yards, 24th, and 14 total touchdowns, like I said, number 3 at wide receiver. But he did have a 24.4% target share, 36.4 red zone target share, 16th at wide receiver. So it is possible that he could, maybe score 14 touchdowns. Again, is that a good bet? Maybe not. He only scored 7 in 2019, ranking 13th at the wide receiver position. In 2018, he scored 9. So maybe he's going to fall back to 8 or 9, and I think that makes him fall down a decent amount in drafts. And I also think Justin Jefferson may be even more involved this season. Because earlier on, like I said, he had those 2 down games. If he's more involved in those games, like the whole season, I think Adam Thielen could take a dip, dive, and a duck. In that movie about the dodgeball where throwing wrenches and shit. He does that. He takes a duck down the rankings. And again, there's nothing to be ashamed of as wide receiver 21, but I think unless he scores a shit ton of touchdowns again, that he's probably going to finish around wide receiver 21. At number 22, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Shout out to Taylor Swift. Wide receiver, Kenny G-Spot, Kenny Gallaudet, Kenny Bones, wide receiver of the New York Football Giants. Underdog ADP, wide receiver, number 31. Overall pick, 66.50. He's a 6th round pick right now. And I don't understand it. I really do not understand it. Unless Kenny Gallaudet just misses the rest of training camp, misses the rest of preseason, which shouldn't happen. He should be back in practice this week. Then why are people worried about Kenny Gallaudet? I don't understand it, right? Sure, the guy's on a team. That's not amazing. And I've said this a million times. I've talked about Kenny Gallaudet ad nauseum because Kenny Gallaudet was originally going as like a top 24 wide receiver, and people went into full panic mode and now are worried. I understand Daniel Jones isn't very good. I personally hate Daniel Jones. I don't think Daniel Jones has an ounce of skill in his body. All of his skill points went to interceptions. If this was like Madden, his interception chance percentage is maxed out. That's where all of it went to. His fumble chance maxed out. That's where all the skill points went to. Now, can Daniel Jones be solid enough to feed Kenny Gallaudet, though? Yes. You want to know why? Because all you have to do is throw the ball somewhere near Kenny Gallaudet, and he's going to catch the football. It's not that complicated. Now, last year, Kenny Gallaudet was shit because he got hurt. He only played in 5 games. And if I'm being honest with you, I think he kind of held out on purpose because he wanted that bag in New York. He wanted to leave the team, so he kind of just stayed out. He finished as wide receiver 102 in PPR, wide receiver 102 as well in half PPR, 99 in standard. From points per game perspective, even when he was healthy, he honestly wasn't playing that great. 35 in PPR, tied with CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 31 in half PPR, and 24 in standard, averaging 13.2 PPR points per game, 11.2 half PPR points per game, and 9.2 standard points per game. So Kenny Gallaudet wasn't very good last year. But what I want you not to look at is the fact that he had only 32 targets last year, 20 receptions, 338 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. I want you to take a look at 2019. Now, again, the reason why I talk about Kenny Gallaudet comparing him to Robert Woods is because this is what Robert Woods can potentially do. And I think that Daniel Jones is not going to help Kenny Gallaudet reach top 12 status. But at wide receiver 31, being drafted basically as a bottom of the barrel wide receiver 3 is so fucking disrespectful. 116 targets last year, or 2019, 7.2 per game, 21st at wide receiver, 65 receptions, 4.1 per game, 29th, 1,190 receiving yards, 74.4 per game, 6th, 11 total touchdowns, number 1, 21.1% target share, 32nd at wide receiver, 25% red zone target share. Now again, do I think Daniel Jones can make Kenny Gallaudet a top 12 wide receiver? No. But he can feed him enough for him to finish easily inside the top 24. So at wide receiver 31, underdog is just basically kicking him directly in the cock, basically, and implying that, like, the users who are drafting on there, besides me, I draft him all the time, are just implying that he sucks. Now, again, if he's still hurt by the end of next week and there is no positive signs of him being fine, then I run for the fucking hills like on The Weeknd. He wrote a song called The Hills, I believe. That's a song by him. So, yeah. That's just how I feel about it. I think Kenny Gallaudet is being severely underdrafted right now, but if the injury continues to, impact him, then go ahead and run away. I mean, on August 2nd, his ADP was wide receiver, or overall pick 52.91. Right now, it's at pick 66.50. It basically fell down 10 plus spots since August 2nd. Don't panic. just yet about Kenny Gallaudet. At number 23, shout out to Michael Jordan, we have Tyler Lockett, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks, underdog ADP, wide receiver, number 15 overall pick, 35.30, making him the 11th pick inside of the third round. Taking Tyler Lockett is one of the biggest gambles you can make in fantasy football. I say it's a gamble because sometimes when you fucking throw your money on red, you win everything. And other times it hits black, and then sometimes it hits green. You know what I'm saying? If we're talking about a roulette table. So don't put all of your eggs into the basket of Tyler Lockett because this man is so inconsistent. There's going to be games this season where I'm telling you, he is going to take a defense, metaphorically bend the defense over the table, and relentlessly fuck them. Literally, he's going to drop like 40 plus points in probably 3 games out of the season. Maybe 40 plus too much, but 35 plus points in PPR multiple times next season. But what comes with those 35 plus point games is the games where he scores 7 points. I'm just going to pull up his stats from last year on a per game basis, and I'm going to read you where he finished because his finish compared to the per game basis and the confusion you have with Tyler Lockett is very high. Week 1 against Atlanta, wide receiver 20.5 PPR. Week 2 against New England, wide receiver 11. Week 3 against Dallas, number one wide receiver. Week 4 against Miami, wide receiver 76. And he went up against Nick Needham, not even the Dolphins, anywhere near the best cornerback in Miami. Number 5 against Minnesota, wide receiver 50 in week 5. Then week 7 against Arizona, literally destroys the Arizona Cardinals. Number 1 wide receiver. Then the next week, after just destroying the Arizona Cardinals against San Francisco, wide receiver 54, then wide receiver 62 in week 9, then week 11 against Arizona, wide receiver 11, followed by wide receiver 71, 42, 42, 65, 61, final week, wide receiver 5. What are you supposed to do with that? Basically, every single week this season, I'm going to go on and tell you, because I do a wide receiver start sit, wide receiver rankings every single week. I'm literally going to get on here, grab the microphone, pretend this water bottle is the microphone. No free ads. Hopefully you can't see what brand this water bottle is. But what I go and I'll say, hey, Tyler Lockett, that's a guy that's either going to be a top 10 wide receiver or finishes like wide receiver 60. You go ahead and take your guess. You start him every single week because you drafted him so high. You can't fucking bench him, and you never know when this guy's going to go off because, like I'm saying, up against these terrible defenses. For instance here, let's see. Where's his game up against the Jets? Against the Jets, up against a garbage defense, this man finished as wide receiver 42. Up against the Washington football team, a great defense, wide receiver 65. But then he'll go up against these other really elite defenses and play amazing or terrible. There is no rhythm to the rhyme to the rhythm. I don't even know what the saying is. There is no way. I don't even think those are sayings. But there's no way to figure out why the fuck this is happening. He just, every single week, it's like a random dice roll. So it's like a spin of the roulette wheel. Again, he was wide receiver 8 in PPR, 9.5 PPR, and 11 in standard last season in 16 games, averaging 16.6 PPR points per game, 13.5 half PPR points per game, and 10.3 standard points per game. Meaning from a points per game perspective, he was the wide receiver 12 in PPR, 12.5 PPR, and the wide receiver 16 in standard. So he's clearly a guy that can do good. But from a week in, week out basis, you are going to be pulling your hair out for Tyler Lockett, and you will finally think you figured it out. Because maybe at the beginning of this season, right, he dominates against the bad defenses, plays like shit against the good defenses, and you think, man, you have an epiphany. You have a big brain moment where you're seeing it. You're just seeing the numbers everywhere. You're thinking, man, Tyler Lockett, good against bad defenses, not the best against good defenses. I know what to do. I'll sit him against the good defenses, play him against the bad defense. And then the next week, he'll play up against this garbage-ass defense, and we'll drop like 0 points. There is really no way to figure out what Tyler Lockett is going to do. He's going to probably finish inside the top 12 at the end of the season, but it won't feel like it at all because half the time he's going in, the other half the time he's doing nothing. 132 targets on the season, 8.2 per game ranking 11th at wide receiver, 100 receptions, 6.2 per game ranking 5th. He had a 24.6% target share, 15th at wide receiver, 1,054 receiving yards, 15th at wide receiver, and 10 total touchdowns, 8th at wide receiver. Again, like I was talking about with DK Metcalf earlier, I believe that this is going to be a much more run-heavy team in 2021. Lockett and Metcalf take a dip, and like I said, when Lockett goes off, Metcalf's bad. When Metcalf goes off, Lockett's bad. Lockett could easily finish inside the top 10, and I wouldn't be surprised, but drafting him at the price where he's going right now is wide receiver 15. With how up and down he is to me, I just simply can't do it. Final wide receiver in the top 24, Titty Boy, T. Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals, underdog ADP wide receiver 22, overall pick 46.00, going up recently, 10th pick inside the 4th round right now. T. Higgins is a wide receiver that I love this season. Jamar Chase, preseason, dude, this guy sucks. Now, do I expect him to suck all season? Probably not, right? There's going to be a switch flipped, and eventually he's going to be consistent. The reason why he's playing like shit right now, he literally can't get separation in training camp from the Bengals corners, the Bengals defensive backs. The Bengals don't have a good defense, spoiler alert. Little known fact, their defense sucks. And he can't get away from those guys. How do you expect him to get away when he plays against any legitimate cornerback? He can't. Even in fucking preseason, he can't get separation. Dropping balls left and right. Now I expect Jamar Chase to be fine a couple of weeks into the season, but I think T. Higgins could legitimately be the wide receiver number 1 in targets in what should be a very pass-heavy offense this season because the defense is so bad and they have to pass the ball a lot. Similar situation to Atlanta, similar situation to the Dallas Cowboys in 16 games last year. T. Higgins, shout out to Pat Mayo, he always says T. Higgins, and I always fucking say it in my videos because it's funny. Wide receiver number 28 in PPR, wide receiver 30.5 PPR, and the wide receiver number 28 in standard, averaging 12.2 PPR points per game, 10.1 half PPR points per game, and 8 standard points per game. Meaning from a points per game perspective, Higgins was the wide receiver 40 in PPR, 39 half PPR, and 47 in standard. He had 107 targets last season, 29th at wide receiver, 7.1 per game, I should say. 67 receptions, 4.5 per game, 30th, 908 receiving yards, 60.5 per game, 26th, and 6 total touchdowns, 25th at wide receiver with just a 20.2% target share in the offense, 36th, and a 14.7% red zone target share. Now again, this is without Joe Burrow for some of the time. If Joe Burrow's healthy, if he's good to go for week number 1, which is my belief, then T. Higgins and all these wide receivers in Cincinnati, they're going to be eaten, except for Jamar Chase because he can't hold on to the football. I love T. Higgins this year. I've been liking him all off season long. Once they added Jamar Chase, I kind of, fucking hit the reverse in the, when you're in the car with the Prindle, you hit reverse. I was backing up, and then I realized, I had this epiphany. I realized, oh man, Jamar Chase isn't looking good. Maybe T. Higgins is the number 1 wide receiver, and maybe with Joe Burrow healthy and them throwing the ball a lot, that T. Higgins could be really good in 2021. So thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you guys did end up enjoying this video. If you did, please make sure if you are new to hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure to hit that like button as well. This video is dropping very, very late tonight. I do apologize, but when I record these videos, it takes like an hour. Talk about 12 players. It takes me like an hour, so it is edited down. Obviously, it's not going to be an hour long because there are pauses where I need to take a drink of water or something because I don't know what kind of person can talk for an hour without drinking any water. So I love you guys. Make sure that you stay safe. Have a great rest of your guys' day. As always, good boy. Oh, and happy Monday, baby. We've been rising up these subscribers. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. I do love you guys all. I always say that at the end of the video, but please make sure that you stay safe. And if you ever need to talk to anyone, do not fret. Make sure you just DM me on Twitter. I try to answer every single person on Twitter. I apologize if I don't get to you, but if it's something very serious, I always make sure to get back to you guys. I love you guys. Stay safe. Without you guys, this channel is nothing. So thank you guys for everything. I love you guys. Stay safe. Good boy.